I was made to be incorruptible. That is what they told us, what they carved into our bones and gene forged into our blood. We were the Emperor's chosen, his angels of death, and corruption was something that happened to lesser men, to mortals, to the weak-willed masses who lacked our conditioning, our purity seals, our centuries of psycho-indoctrination. I believed this with the same certainty I believed in the weight of my bolter, the righteousness of my cause, the inevitability of victory. I was Brother Marcus Valen of the Ironbearers chapter, and I had served the Imperium for 117 years without a single wavering thought. I want you to understand that. I need you to understand that. I was not weak. I was not flawed. I was exactly what they made me to be, and still, it was not enough. The corruption began during the Void Breach on the strike cruiser Penitent Sword. We were 3 weeks into our translation through the Imperium, bound for the Helix cluster, where a minor Xenos incursion required cleansing. Routine, that was the word our chaplain used when he blessed us before departure. A routine cleansing. I had performed dozens of such operations. The Xenos would die. We would return. The chapter's honor would be maintained. But the Void Breach was not routine. I do not know what caused the Geller field to flicker. The tech adepts who survived could offer no explanation, only their clicking binary prayers and the smell of sanctified oils as they desperately tended to wounded machinery. What I know is that for 17 seconds, the barrier between our ship and the screaming madness outside ceased to exist. 17 seconds. I have counted them in my mind 10,000 times since. 17 seconds during which the Imperium poured through the corridors of the Penitent Sword like blood through ruptured veins. I was in the training hall when it happened, alone. I had been practicing blade forms, the rhythmic sweep and thrust that had been drilled into me since my transformation from human child to posthuman warrior. The lights died first, then came the cold, a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. A cold that seemed to reach through my power armor and grip the twin hearts beating in my chest. And then I heard the voice. It did not speak words, not at first. It was more like a pressure against my consciousness, a weight settling into the spaces between my thoughts. I raised my blade and took a defensive stance, my autosenses scanning for threats. But there was nothing to fight, nothing visible, nothing tangible. Just that presence. That awful knowing pressure, and a sound like whispered laughter that seemed to come from inside my own skull. The lights returned. The cold receded. I stood alone in the training hall, my blade still raised against an enemy that had already departed. When I reported to the chaplain, I told him everything. I held nothing back. Brother Ezekiel, a warrior who had served the chapter for over 4 centuries, listened to my account with his skull-faced helm betraying nothing. He anointed my armor with sacred oils. He pressed a purity seal against my forehead and spoke the litany of protection. He told me I had done well to resist, that the warp was always testing us, always probing for weakness. He told me I was clean. I believed him. Why would I not? I felt no different. My thoughts were clear. My devotion was unwavering. The incident faded into memory, filed alongside 100 other moments of hardship overcome. We emerged from the warp 2 days later, and I threw myself into the campaign against the Xenos with the same methodical brutality I had always employed. I killed efficiently. I followed orders precisely. I showed no mercy because the Emperor's enemies deserved none. In every measurable way, I was exactly the weapon I had been forged to be. But something had changed. Something I did not notice at first. Something so subtle that by the time I recognized it, the damage was already catastrophic. It started with the silence. Space Marines do not sleep as mortals do. Our enhanced physiology allows us to enter a state of reduced consciousness, a kind of waking rest that maintains our combat readiness while allowing our bodies to regenerate. During these periods, there has always been silence in my mind. Not peace, exactly, but an absence of thought, a blankness that I had come to find restful. After the Void Breach, the silence was no longer silent. There was something in it, something waiting. At first, I dismissed it as the echo of trauma, the mind playing tricks. Even an Astartes mind can be affected by exposure to the Imperium, and I had been closer to the warp than most. I told myself the whispers would fade. I told myself the presence I felt lurking at the edges of my consciousness was nothing more than memory, the phantom sensation of a wound that had already healed. I told myself many things during those first weeks. I was very good at lying to myself. All Space Marines are. It is part of our conditioning. The campaign in the Helix cluster lasted 4 months. I killed 1,307 Xenos during that time. I know the exact number because I began counting. I do not know why. Counting had never been important to me before, but suddenly it seemed essential. A way of imposing order on a universe that felt increasingly unstable. Every kill was a number. Every prayer was a number. Every step I took, every round I fired, every breath that filled my enhanced lungs, I counted everything. And the counting brought a kind of comfort, a structure that kept the whispers at bay. Brother Captain Aldrich noticed first. He called me to his chambers after the Battle of Helix Prime, where I had held a breach in our lines for 6 hours against waves of Xenos assault. A commendable action, he said. The kind of heroism that would be recorded in the chapter's chronicles. But he had noticed something in my demeanor. A certain intensity, a fixation that went beyond standard combat focus. He asked if I was well. I told him I was. I told him the campaign had been demanding, but that I remained combat effective. I did not tell him about the whispers. I did not tell him that I had begun to hear words in the static between Vox transmissions, words that were not being spoken by any of my brothers. I did not tell him that when I looked at my reflection in the polished surface of my helm, sometimes, just for a moment, my eyes were not my own. I should have told him. I know that now. I should have submitted myself for evaluation, allowed the chaplains and the apothecaries to examine my mind and my gene seed. That is the protocol. That is what a loyal Space Marine does when he suspects contamination. But I did not do it, and I have spent years trying to understand why. Was it pride? Was it fear? Was it the whispers themselves, already working their poison, already steering me away from the salvation that might have been possible? I do not know. Perhaps it does not matter. What matters is that I stayed silent, and silence is where corruption grows. The first time I lost control was on Draven's world, a hive city we had been tasked with defending against a cultist uprising. The heretics had emerged from the underhive, thousands of them, their bodies marked with the 8-pointed star of the Ruinous Powers. I had fought cultists before. They were usually pathetic, malnourished wretches who threw themselves at our guns with more fanaticism than skill. Easy kills, numbers on my count. But when I saw their symbols, something shifted in my perception. The 8-pointed star seemed to pulse with its own light, and I felt the presence in my mind stir from its hiding place. It was not whispers this time. It was a roar, a torrent of emotion that crashed through my psycho-conditioning like a wave through sand. Rage, not the cold, controlled fury of an Astartes in battle, but something raw and primal, and utterly alien to everything I had been taught to be. I felt my grip tighten on my bolter. I felt my twin hearts accelerate beyond combat parameters. I felt my lips pull back from my teeth in a snarl that had nothing to do with battlefield doctrine. I killed 47 cultists in the next 3 minutes, not with the precise, efficient methodology of my training, but with something closer to frenzy. I did not count the ammunition I expended. I did not track my positioning relative to my squad. I simply killed, and every death fed something hungry that had taken up residence in my chest. When the rage finally receded, I found myself standing in a circle of torn bodies, my armor slick with blood that steamed in the polluted air. My brothers were staring at me. I could not see their faces behind their helms, but I could feel their unease. I could smell their suspicion. I reported the incident to the chaplain that night. This time, I could not remain silent. The loss of control had been too complete, too visible. Brother Ezekiel listened again, his skull-faced visage as unreadable as ever. He asked me questions. Had I heard anything during the combat? Had I seen anything unusual? Had I felt compelled by an outside force? I told him the truth, mostly. I told him about the rage, about the loss of control, about the way the cultist symbols had seemed to call to something inside me. But I did not tell him about the whispers. I did not tell him that the presence in my mind had spoken to me during the killing, had praised me, had promised me more. I kept those secrets because I was afraid of what they meant, because some part of me, some part I did not want to acknowledge, had enjoyed what happened. Brother Ezekiel performed the rite of cleansing. He spoke the prayers. He burned the incense. He pressed sacred relics against my flesh until the skin beneath my armor blistered and healed and blistered again. At the end, he told me I had been tested and found strong. He told me the Emperor's light still burned within me. He told me to be vigilant. I wanted to believe him. I tried to believe him. But the presence in my mind was laughing, and its laughter sounded like my own voice. The months that followed were a slow descent into a darkness I could not name. I continued to fight. I continued to kill. From the outside, I was still Brother Marcus Vallon, a reliable warrior of the Iron Bearers. I followed orders. I maintained my equipment. I participated in prayers and rituals with the same outward devotion I had always shown. But inside, the presence was growing. It fed on my violence. It whispered during my rest cycles. It showed me visions that I told myself were dreams but which felt more real than waking life. The visions were always the same. I stood in a vast space that was not quite darkness, not quite light. The architecture around me defied geometry, towers and bridges, and impossible spirals that my eyes could not track without pain. And at the center of it all, there was a throne. Not the golden throne of the Emperor, though it shared something of that vastness, that terrible grandeur. This throne was made of bones and shadows and frozen screams, and the thing that sat upon it had no face, no form, only a presence that filled the entire space with hungry attention. In the visions, I always walked toward the throne. I could not stop myself. My legs moved without my command, carrying me closer and closer to that faceless hunger. And every time I approached, the thing on the throne spoke to me. Not in words, in something deeper. It showed me what I was beneath the conditioning, beneath the gene-forged flesh, beneath the lies I had been told since childhood. It showed me the truth of my soul. And the truth was that I was already corrupted. I had always been corrupted. The void breach had not planted anything in me. It had simply awakened what was already there. I tried to fight the visions. I prayed. I fasted. I submitted myself to additional sessions with the chaplain, confessing sins I invented to explain my growing unease. Brother Ezekiel was patient with me. He spoke of the trials all warriors face, the doubts that must be overcome, the temptations that must be resisted. He gave me penances that I performed with desperate diligence. 50 lashes, 100 hours of kneeling vigil, the memorization of sacred texts, until my enhanced memory ached with the weight of words. None of it helped. The presence was too deep now, too entwined with my thoughts. I could no longer tell where my mind ended and its influence began. When I felt anger, was it my anger or the thing's hunger? When I felt doubt, was it genuine questioning or the erosion of my faith by some external will? I had been made to be incorruptible, but I was beginning to understand that incorruptibility is itself a corruption, a lie that makes you blind to the darkness growing in your own heart. Brother Ezekiel began watching me. I noticed it during drills, during meals, during the rare moments of quiet between campaigns. His skull helm would turn in my direction, and I would feel his assessment like a weight against my skin. He suspected something. Perhaps he had always suspected, and his reassurances had been a test I was failing. The thought terrified me. If the chaplain determined I was corrupted, there would be no redemption. There would only be the chapter's judgment, swift and final. I began to avoid him. I volunteered for solo reconnaissance missions. I requested transfer to forward positions where oversight was minimal. I told myself I was being prudent, that distance would give me time to master whatever was happening in my mind. But the presence laughed at my justifications. It knew the truth. I was not seeking distance to heal. I was seeking distance to hide. The first murder happened on Talos Station, not a combat kill, not an enemy. A fellow Astartes, Brother Ferdinand, had been with the Iron Bearers for 53 years. A young warrior by our standards, but promising, disciplined, devout. He had been assigned to my reconnaissance squad during the Talos campaign, and he had noticed things, the way I muttered during rest cycles, the way my eyes sometimes unfocused during briefings, as if I were listening to something no one else could hear, the way I flinched at the sight of certain symbols, not heretical ones but imperial ones, the aquila and the crossed bones and the stylized skull of the chaplaincy. He confronted me in the lower decks of the station, in a maintenance corridor where the noise of machinery would cover our voices. He told me he was concerned. He told me he had noticed changes in my demeanor. He asked me, directly and with genuine care in his voice, if I was well. I meant to reassure him. I meant to lie, as I had been lying for months, to smile and speak the expected words and send him away satisfied. But the presence had other plans. When I opened my mouth, what came out was not my voice. It was something older, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The words were in a language I did not know, a language that burned my throat as it passed my lips. Brother Ferdinand's eyes went wide behind his visor. He reached for his weapon. He was too slow. I do not remember killing him. That is another lie I tell myself. The truth is that I remember every detail with perfect clarity. The way my hands closed around his throat, the sound of his armor cracking under pressure it was never designed to withstand, the way his struggles weakened and then stopped, and the way the presence in my mind purred with satisfaction as his life force drained away. I remember standing over his body, my hands still trembling with stolen strength, and I remember the voice, my voice, his voice, all voices blending into one, telling me that this was only the beginning. I disposed of the body in the reactor waste. I fabricated a story about a Xenos ambush, a brave death in service to the Emperor. The chapter accepted my account without question. Brother Ferdinand was added to the roll of the fallen, his name spoken with honor, his sacrifice commemorated in stone. I attended the memorial service with my brothers. I spoke the prayers. I lit the candles, and inside, the presence laughed at how easy it had been. After Ferdinand, the murders became regular, not frequent enough to draw attention, but steady. A battle brother lost during a chaotic engagement, a chapter serf who saw something he should not have seen, an apothecary who detected anomalies in my gene seed and was silenced before he could report them. Each death fed the presence, made it stronger, gave it more purchase on my increasingly fractured mind. I told myself I was protecting my brothers, that my corruption would destroy them all if it were discovered, that the deaths were necessary sacrifices. The lies came easier now. The presence had taught me well. It was Brother Ezekiel who finally forced the confrontation I had been dreading. He came to my chambers in the dead of the ship's night cycle, his skull helm removed to reveal the scarred, ancient face beneath. 400 years of service had carved deep lines around his eyes, and those eyes, dark and knowing, fixed on me with an intensity that stripped away every pretense. He told me he knew. Not everything, but enough. He had been tracking the disappearances, analyzing the patterns, praying for guidance. The Emperor had shown him visions of his own, visions of a brother lost to the darkness, a weapon turned against those it was forged to protect. He had not come to condemn me, he said. He had come to save me. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something like hope. The presence recoiled from Brother Ezekiel's faith, from the purity that radiated from him like heat from a flame. Perhaps redemption was still possible. Perhaps the chaplain could reach into my soul and pull out the thing that had taken root there. Perhaps I could be clean again. But the moment passed. The presence surged forward, and I felt my face twist into a smile that was not mine. Brother Ezekiel saw it. I watched recognition flash in his eyes, followed by sorrow, followed by the grim acceptance of a warrior who knows what must be done. He reached for his Crozius, the sacred weapon of his office, the hammer that had crushed 1,000 heretics. He was faster than Ferdinand, stronger. His faith was a shield that the presence could not easily penetrate. We fought in my chambers, 2 posthuman warriors moving at speeds no mortal eye could follow. His Crozius struck my shoulder, and I felt bones shatter and reform. My fist connected with his chest, and I heard ribs crack beneath ceramite. We bled on each other. We cursed in languages human and otherwise. The walls of my chambers were destroyed by the violence of our struggle. In the end, I was stronger. Not because I was more skilled, not because I was more faithful, because the presence had been feeding for months, growing fat on the deaths I had given it, and its strength had become my strength. I caught Brother Ezekiel's arm mid-swing and twisted until the joint separated. I drove my forehead into his face and felt his skull cave beneath the impact. I held him as he died, his blood running over my hands, his final words a prayer that the Emperor might have mercy on my soul. There was no mercy for me. I knew that as I stood over his body. The presence had won. Whatever I had been, whatever I might have been, was gone now. There was only the corruption, spreading through every cell of my engineered flesh, rewriting the very essence of what I was. I could feel it changing me, not just my mind but my body. My muscles were growing denser, my senses were sharpening beyond even Astartes' parameters, and somewhere in my chest, beneath my twin hearts, a third heart was beginning to beat. I fled the Iron Bearers that night. I took a shuttle from the strike cruiser and burned into the void before my brothers could respond to the alarms. I do not know if they pursued me. I do not know if they mourned the loss of Brother Ezekiel, if they understood what had killed him, if they spoke my name with hatred or with pity. I left everything behind. My chapter, my oaths, my identity, everything except the presence, which came with me into the darkness between stars. The years since then have been a blur of violence and revelation. I have wandered the galaxy, drawn by instincts I do not control to places where the walls between reality and the warp are thin. I have killed Imperials and Xenos and fellow servants of chaos with equal indifference. I have felt my body continue to change, bones lengthening, muscles twisting into new configurations, my face reshaping itself into something that no longer resembles the warrior I was. The presence speaks to me constantly now. It no longer whispers, it roars. I have learned its name, though I will not write it here. Names have power, and some powers are too terrible to invoke even in confession. What I will say is that it is old, older than the Imperium, older than humanity. It was waiting in the warp long before the Emperor united Terra, long before the first Space Marine was forged from human clay. It waits, and it watches, and it chooses its vessels with patient care. I was chosen before I was born. The void breach was not accident, it was invitation. The throne I saw in my visions was real. I found it eventually on a world that exists in both reality and the immaterium simultaneously. A world where the sky is always the color of bruises, and the ground pulses with a heartbeat that matches my own. The thing that sits on the throne welcomed me as a long-lost son. It showed me the true shape of the universe, the wars that rage beyond mortal perception, the gods that feast on human souls like cattle. It offered me a place in its design. I accepted. What else could I do? I had already given everything. My honor, my brothers, my humanity. The only thing left was my service, and the thing on the throne was happy to receive it. I am writing this confession not as a warning, though perhaps it will serve as one. I am writing it because I want someone to understand what happened to me, how a loyal warrior, an incorruptible weapon, a proud son of the Emperor, could become what I have become. The answer is simpler than the Imperium wants to believe. We are all corruptible. Every one of us. The gene forging and the conditioning and the psycho-indoctrination, they do not make us pure. They make us brittle. They create walls in our minds that seem strong but shatter at the first real pressure. The enemy does not need to break down our defenses. It only needs to find the cracks that were always there. I was made to be incorruptible, and that very making was my corruption. I was taught that doubt was weakness, so I hid my doubts until they festered into madness. I was taught that confession was shameful, so I kept my secrets until they devoured me from within. I was taught that I was above humanity, superior, sanctified, and that arrogance made me blind to the humanity that remained in me, the humanity that was my only true protection against the darkness. The thing on the throne asked me once what I had learned from my fall. I told it that I had learned the truth about the Imperium, about the lies we tell ourselves, about the weakness we mistake for strength. It laughed, a sound like breaking worlds, and told me I had learned nothing. The truth, it said, was much simpler than that. The truth is that corruption is not an invasion. It is a homecoming. We are born from corruption, shaped by corruption, sustained by corruption. The warp is not some external hell that threatens to consume us. It is the mirror that shows us what we truly are. The thing that awakened in me during the void breach was not alien to my soul. It was my soul, the part I had been trained to deny, the hunger and the rage and the terrible joy of destruction that lurks in every thinking being. The Space Marines are corruption given form. We pretend otherwise. We wrap ourselves in prayer and ritual and the trappings of righteousness. But we are weapons, and weapons exist only to destroy. The only difference between a loyal Astartes and a servant of chaos is the target of our destruction. One kills for the Emperor, one kills for the gods. But the killing is the same. The joy is the same. The corruption is the same. I know this because I have stood on both sides of that divide. I have killed in the Emperor's name and felt righteous. I have killed in the name of darker powers and felt the same righteousness, the same certainty, the same sublime satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. The conditioning is identical. Only the symbols change. Perhaps that is why the Imperium fears chaos so much, not because it is different, but because it is the same. Because every loyal warrior who looks upon a servant of the Ruinous Powers is looking at a reflection of what they might become, what they already are, beneath the armor and the prayers and the carefully constructed lies. I was Brother Marcus Vallon of the Iron Bearers. I served the Emperor for 117 years. I killed his enemies with precision and dedication. I believed in his light. I believed in my own purity. I believed in the incorruptibility of my soul. I was wrong about all of it. Now I am something else, something that has no name in the languages of men. I serve the thing on the throne, or perhaps I am the thing on the throne, or perhaps there is no difference anymore. I have killed more since my fall than I ever killed in the Emperor's service. I have brought worlds to ruin. I have corrupted other warriors, whispering to them during their moment of weakness, showing them the cracks in their own conditioning. I have become what I was always meant to be. The presence is no longer separate from me. We are one now, have been one for years, will be one until the stars burn out and the universe collapses into final darkness. I do not miss what I was. I do not mourn the brother I killed or the chapter I betrayed. Those feelings have been burned away, replaced by a cold certainty that passes for peace. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between slaughters, I remember what it felt like to be clean, to kneel before the altar and feel genuine faith, to stand beside my brothers and know that we were bound by something greater than ourselves. I remember what it felt like to be human, even in my post-human flesh, and in those moments, I feel something that might be regret, might be sorrow, might be the last flickering ember of the soul I was told could never be corrupted. The thing on the throne tells me that ember will fade, that eventually I will be fully its creature, with no memory of the warrior I was, no connection to the brotherhood I betrayed. It tells me this is mercy, that the pain of remembering is unnecessary, a weakness that will be purged along with all other weakness. Perhaps it is right. Perhaps final corruption will bring the peace that my endless war cannot provide. Perhaps I will cease to be Marcus Vallon entirely and become something new, something that never knew doubt or sorrow or the weight of oaths broken. But not yet. Not today. Today I still remember. Today I still feel the ghost of what I was pressing against the monster I have become. Today I am writing this confession, this warning, this memorial to a soul that was never as incorruptible as it believed. I do not ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I do not ask for understanding. There can be none. I ask only that whoever reads these words learns from my fall. Not the lesson the Imperium would teach, the lesson about vigilance and prayer and the importance of confession. That lesson is a lie. Another piece of the conditioning that makes corruption possible. The true lesson is simpler, darker, more terrible. We are all already corrupted, every one of us. The Emperor's light does not burn away the darkness in our souls. It only blinds us to its presence. The only defense against chaos is not purity but awareness, not denial but acceptance, not the arrogance of believing we are above temptation, but the humility of knowing we are all capable of falling. I fell because I believed I could not fall. I was corrupted because I believed I was incorruptible. If I had understood my own weakness, my own darkness, my own capacity for evil, perhaps I could have faced it honestly. Perhaps I could have sought help before the presence grew too strong. Perhaps I could have remained Brother Marcus Vallon, a warrior of the Iron Bearers, a servant of the Emperor. But perhaps not. Perhaps my fall was inevitable, written into the very genes that made me posthuman. Perhaps the thing on the throne was always waiting for me, and no amount of self-awareness could have saved me from its embrace. Perhaps corruption is not a choice but a fate, the destiny of all who are born into this universe of darkness and blood. I do not know. I will never know. All I know is what I have become, and what I have become is beyond redemption. The soul of a space marine, corrupted by chaos, a warning to all who believe themselves beyond temptation, a monument to the fragility of faith and the inevitability of the fall. My name was Marcus Vallon. I was made to be incorruptible, and I was corrupted anyway. Remember me, learn from me, and pray that when the whispers come for you, as they will come for everyone eventually, you will have the wisdom I lacked, the humility I could not find, the courage to face your own darkness before it consumes you. But even as I write those words, I hear the thing on the throne laughing. It knows what you know now, what I learned too late. There is no wisdom that can save you. There is no humility that can protect you. There is only the long fall into darkness, and the discovery that the darkness was inside you all along. This is what happens when the soul of a space marine is corrupted by chaos. This is what happens to all of us.